One of the most important parts of interpersonal communication actually involves the use of no-verbal language at all. Although I am not an expert on this topic, I have been studying nonverbal communication in class this semester and in many scholarly articles. I have also developed an interest in nonverbal communication since I initially learned about it. In this speech, I will first discuss what nonverbal communication actually is. Second, I will discuss how culture influences nonverbal communication. Finally, I will discuss how nonverbal communication affects interaction. Nonverbal communication is defined as any communication that does not involve words. According to Nonverbal Communication, written by communication and psychology professors Judith Hall and Mark Knapp, nonverbal cues can be defined as all potentially informative behaviors that are not purely linguistic in content. According to this source, there are also many different types of visual nonverbal cues and auditory nonverbal cues. These cues are critical to the way we understand one another as well as the things we see. Nonverbal cues are involved in the facial expressions, hand gestures, and even the non-linguistic sounds we make, among many other things. These cues allow us to express and understand each other in a way we can't with linguistic communication alone. By using nonverbal communication, we're able to express emotions and interpret communication with others. Nonverbal communication reflects the same rules and patterns of certain cultures. In the book, The Power of Nonverbal Communication, How You Act is More Important Than What You Say, written by Henry Calero, the correlation between culture and type of nonverbal communication are discussed. Calero states, culture is the type of nonverbal communication because each culture establishes its own accepted and non-accepted behaviors. Due to these differences, there is a gap in understanding between cultures. Because an outsider of a culture must not only know and understand the verbal language, but also the customs, gestures, and expressions of that culture. For example, many gestures used in America, such as a thumbs up, typically mean something positive, such as good job in the US, but mean one in Germany, 5 in Japan, and much more offensive things in other countries. Another common gesture in America is a wave of a hand as a greeting. However, in Europe, a wave of a hand signals a disagreement rather than a welcoming motion. This shows how the use of nonverbal communication varies from place to place and country to country based on the culture. Nonverbal communication can also organize interaction between people and express meaning in relationships. Laura Guerrero and Corey Floyd, communication professors, state in their book, Nonverbal Communication and Close Relationships, that nonverbal communication is the predominant means of conveying meaning from person to person, and nonverbal behaviors account for 60 to 65% of the meaning conveyed in an interpersonal exchange. This exemplifies the monumental part nonverbal communication, such as facial expressions and hand gestures, play in assisting our interpretations of things conveyed to us. This example reinforces that nonverbal communication is necessary to our interpretation of things others say, as well as the development of our relationships with others. Nonverbal communication is essential to communicating and is shaped by culture and shapes the development of relationships. Today I discussed what nonverbal communication is. Second, I discussed how culture can influence nonverbal communication. Lastly, I discussed how nonverbal communication organizes interaction and affects relationships. Without nonverbal communication, it would be much harder, if not impossible, to effectively communicate and interpret communication of others. In summation, nonverbal communication is a vital part of communicating that we use in our everyday lives to help clarify and reinforce meaning in our communication.
Hi, good.